सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। Tattvabodha is a text that we are doing during this week. Bodha means knowledge and Tattva means truth or the essential nature. Tasya bhavaha tattvam, the state or the essential nature of something is called tattva. So essential nature, the truth is tattva, and bodha means the knowledge. Tattvabodha means the knowledge of the truth. That is the subject matter of this text. Knowledge of the truth. Before we proceed to study this text, we would like to know what relevance the knowledge of the truth has in our life. There is something called truth. But whether I know it or not, does it matter to me? The answer is yes, it matters to me. Because this truth is that which is very much involved in our life. The truth pervades our life, permeates our life, is the basis of the entire life. So that which is the basis is called the truth. And so we are living a life, that is the basis of the life, that is called truth. We interact with the world, that is the basis of the world, that's the truth. We ourselves interact, we are the individuals, the basis of our own self, that is the truth. So this reality is namely ourselves, the individual, the world with which we interact, and third, namely God, who has created this world. The individual, the creation and God, the Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara, these are the three entities that comprise our life. And there is an essential nature of myself, has to be, everything has to have an essential nature. Like heat is the essential nature of fire. Light is the essential nature of sun. So also, whatever is created, whatever exists has an essential nature, because of which a thing is what it is. So fire is fire because of heat, and sun is sun because of light or brightness. And so also, what is it because of which I am what I am? What is it because of which the world is what it is? Because what is it because of which God is what He is? That will be called the truth or the essential nature. So, what is the essential nature of myself? What is the essential nature of the world around us. And what's the essential nature of God? So these three entities form our life, and therefore it becomes very important for us to understand what is the essential nature of each of the three. You might say there are many things in this world and I do not know and I can still live my life. I don't know about the black holes. I don't know about the theory of relativity. I don't know about many things. I don't know what is underneath the earth or beyond the sky. I don't know many things in this life, and still my life goes on. That every day I go to work, I make a living, I live my life without knowing many things. So there may be essential nature of myself, yes. There is essential nature of the world, okay. There is God, fine. Or there may not be God, that also is fine. Is it important for me to know what these things are? Some of you are here for the first time, and this question may arise, is it important for us to know these things, understand these things? Because sometimes we come here because some people send us here also, and therefore we are totally innocent about what's going on here. And so also the question may arise, why should I worry about this? There are many things to worry about in my life anyway. At place of work there are many things to worry about. At home, in the family, there are many things to worry about and many things to know also. Why add one more thing? And why worry about this? Is it one more thing? The question is this the Tattva, the truth that we are talking about, is it just one of those things or is just one more thing to know? The answer is no, it is the thing to know. And thus, this Tattva of the truth is extremely important in our life because it is the very basis of our life. It is the very basis of our own self. And if you say it permeates every moment of our life. The world has an important role to play in our life. Our own self, of course, has an important role to play in our life. God has an important role to play in our life, and therefore understanding this becomes very essential. Well, if these were just entities with which we are not related, I'm not related to black holes and therefore it doesn't matter whether they are or not and what they are. I'm not related to what is underneath the earth and therefore it doesn't matter what it is and where it is. But when I'm related to something, then it becomes important to me. I'm related to myself, therefore I am very important to me. I'm related to the world, therefore the world is important to me. I'm related to God, therefore it is important to me. They are very important entities in my life. Not only that, but I already have knowledge about them. If I did not know anything about myself, if I had no knowledge of the world, if I had no knowledge of God at all, and without that knowledge, if my life was going on, we would say that, okay, you need not worry. But I have knowledge of all these three. I know who I am, I know what the world around me is, and I know about God also. As we say, even if you say that I don't believe in God, there is also knowledge of God. And therefore, these three entities are very much involved in our life. And we know them. We have knowledge about them or we have opinions about them. I have an opinion about myself, I have an opinion about the world, I have an opinion about God. Not only do I have the opinion about this, but these opinions in fact decide what my life is. My opinion about myself is very important because that decides what I do, how I respond, how I react, how I look at myself and how I perceive myself is extremely important in deciding what my thoughts are, what my desires are, what my priorities are. So my thoughts, my desires, my priorities, the way I come across, the way I relate to you, what my aspirations are, all of these is determined by what perception I have of myself. The way I relate to the world, relate to you, is determined by what perception I have of you, of the world around me. And I also have a perception of God. So I do have perceptions. I do have conclusions about this thing. And not only do I have conclusions or perceptions, but these conclusions in fact determine the very basis of my life. What I do and what I do not know. The way I feel. The way I react. All of this is determined by my perception. Basically, by my perception of myself, and then my perception of you, and my perception of God. So, whatever I feel is always determined by my perception. If I feel happy, that is also because of a perception I have of myself. I feel unhappy, that is also because of a perception I have of myself. If you speak very well of me, then I feel that I'm all right. I'm a good person. I'm a great person. So if that is my perception, that I'm great, I'm successful, I'm good, I'm happy. If you say quite the opposite of that, and then I feel that I'm unsuccessful, I'm no good, then I'm unhappy. So whether I'm happy or not is determined not by anything else, understand, it is simply determined by my perception of myself. The way I'm treated by the world, and how I take that treatment to be, and thus how I look upon myself, the way I'm treated, the way the world is around me. So my happiness depends upon how I perceive myself. And I need to be happy. I cannot accept myself to be unhappy. I cannot accept myself to be failure. I cannot myself to be sad. I want to be happy, I want to be successful, I want to be good. I want to be liked by everybody. I want to like everybody also. All of these are very important to me because they determine whether I am happy or not. And whether I like myself or not is also determined by my perception of myself. Whether I like you or not is determined by my perception of you and my perception of myself and my perception of you. Everything is determined, every moment, whatever I feel is all determined by my perception, my understanding, my knowledge. And therefore, I cannot escape myself. Myself is always there, and therefore I have to confront myself. I have to always deal with myself, and therefore how I know myself is extremely important. I cannot avoid the world also. I have to relate to the world all the time, and therefore my perception of world also is extremely important. So we should know that we already have knowledge of some kind. We have the knowledge of ourselves. We have the knowledge of the world. We have the knowledge of God. We use the word perception. I have a perception of myself. I have a perception of the world. I have a perception of God. And it is these perceptions that determine whether I am happy or unhappy, whether I feel good about myself or not, whether my life is successful or not, is all simply determined by my perception, by nothing else. As I said, whether I am happy or not depends upon how I feel about myself, how I see myself. If I see myself as a successful person, respectable person, good person, I am happy. If I see myself as no good, as insignificant, immaterial, I do not count, I am unhappy. So this should become very clear to us, that whether I am happy or not happy, successful or not successful, I am sad or disappointed, all of these are the results of nothing but my perception of myself. And how I perceive myself is very much also determined by the world around me, the way the world treats me. the way the world pushes variety of buttons in me and the way the world makes me feel about myself. Therefore, my perception of the world also is extremely important. It counts every moment. Every moment of my life is lived with these perceptions. And therefore, it is very important that my perception must be in keeping with the reality. So, my perception, my knowledge, my understanding of myself, is it true to myself or not? My understanding the world, is it true to what the world is or not? See, it is possible that what is in front of me is just a piece of glass. But it is glittering, therefore I may take it to be a diamond. Or there may be diamond, but it is dull, and therefore I may take it to a merely piece of glass. And so how I treat or how I relate to that object is determined not by what that object is, how I view that object. What my perception of that object is. Sometimes just because something is yellow, I think it is gold, and it creates some reaction in me. Then I discover that it is simply brass, and then it creates a different reaction in me. So how I feel, as I said, is all determined by nothing but my perception. And therefore, it is very important that we should have the true perceptions of our own self, of the world and God. And that is where Vedanta comes in. This is the subject matter of Vedanta. What is Vedanta? End of Veda is called Vedanta. And as we are saying, Veda has two sections. The first section deals with what we call dharma. Karma and dharma. Deals with rituals or actions, and dharma, the righteous way of life. So Veda can be broadly divided in two sections. The first section teaches us the righteous way of life, the values of life, the code of conduct, what we should do, what we should not do. All of this is taught to us by the first section of Veda. The second section of Veda teaches us what is the truth of the reality. So dharma is the subject matter of the Karma Kanda, first section of Veda. And Tattva, the truth, is the subject matter of the second section of Veda. This is called the Jnana Kanda, the section dealing with knowledge. First section dealing with karma or the action or dharma, and second section dealing with jnana or knowledge. And what is taught in the first section becomes the means for preparation for what is taught in the second section. And that again we'll discuss. So this second section, which pertains to jnanam or the knowledge, is called Vedanta because it is at the end, at the physical end of the Veda. Because in the beginning there is karma or dharma, at the end there is jnanam or knowledge. So Vedanta is the jnanam or the knowledge section of Veda. It is called Upanishad. Upanishad means knowledge, self-knowledge, or knowledge of truth. So we have these four Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, Atharva Veda. And in each of these Vedas, we have the section dealing with jnana or knowledge. In each Vedas, we have what we call the Upanishads, which are the sections dealing with, which are the texts dealing with knowledge. Therefore, Upanishad or the Jnana Kanda or that section of Veda dealing with knowledge is the main source, because we look upon Vedas as revealed texts, not as written or composed texts, but as revealed texts, revealed by Ishvara to the sages. And so the sages or the rishis are those through whose medium these texts are available to us. But rishis are not the writers or composers, but they are the medium through which these texts are revealed. And therefore, Vedas are revealed texts. We look upon them as the authentic source of knowledge. And therefore, the Jnana Kanda of the section dealing with knowledge is looked upon by us as the authentic source of knowledge of the truth. And Bhagavad Gita, which is its essence of the Vedas and mainly of the Upanishads, which is taught by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, that Bhagavad Gita also is looked upon with equal reverence as the Upanishads, and so that also forms part of what we call Vedanta. Understand, Vedanta is Upanishad, and that is necessarily part of Veda. However, inasmuch as Bhagavad Gita is also taught by Lord Krishna, so Lord is the one who revealed the Vedas, and Lord is the one who revealed Bhagavad Gita also, and therefore Bhagavad Gita also is looked upon with the same reverence as the Upanishads, and therefore that is also included in Vedanta. And there is a third text called Brahma Sutra, a body of knowledge, a text, a treatise, which consists of sutra or aphorisms, which are composed by Badarayana, sage Badarayana or Vedavyasa, which systematically presents the teaching of the Upanishads. So teaching of the Upanishads is systematically presented in the forms of sutra or aphorisms. They are called Brahma Sutra, and that is the third important text which is also included in Vedanta. So even though the literal meaning of the word Vedanta is that which is found at the end section of Veda, but in general the word Vedanta includes the Upanishads, which are found at the end of the Vedas. It includes the Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of the Upanishads, and it includes Brahma Sutra, which is the systematic treatise of what the Upanishads teach. These three texts are called the Vedanta. In Sanskrit they are called Prasthanatrayi. They are the very three foundations or the three pillars upon which what we call the Vedanta is constructed. And subsequently, a number of treatises came to be composed or written based on these three. Like Adi Shankaracharya, he wrote what we call bhashyas or commentaries on these three. He wrote bhashya on Upanishads, bhashya on Brahma Sutra, bhashya on Bhagavad Gita. And his followers, and we form all part of the following of Adi Shankaracharya, the same tradition. Subsequently, great teachers also came into that tradition, and they have written some very great treatises to explain what is taught in those three fundamental texts. And thus we have a vast body of literature which is also called Vedanta. So primarily Upanishads are Vedanta. Bhagavad Gita also becomes Vedanta because it teaches what the Upanishads teach. Brahma Sutra also is called Vedanta because it gives the systematic understanding of what Upanishads teach. And many other texts, such as Viveka Chudamani, such as Panchadashi, such as Upadesha Sahasri, and others, such as Chit Sukhi, Khandana Khanda Khadya, Advaita Siddhi, Brahma Siddhi. Many of these texts are there which are also called Vedanta because they explain, they delineate or elaborate the principles taught in the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita. And we are going to study a small text which is called Tatwa Bhodha. So the name of the text also is Tatwa Bhodha because it deals with Bodha or the knowledge of Tattva. It is also a very small treatise of Vedanta which explains all the principles, which systematically explains the teaching of Vedanta. So what is taught in all those big texts is taught here in this small short text in a simple and a very systematic manner. It is looked upon as an introductory text of Vedanta, which becomes a doorway for us to enter the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, because the concepts that are discussed in those texts are explained here. And once we understand the text such as Tattvabodha, then we have a very good understanding, an overall understanding of what our scriptures teach. Understand that Vedanta forms the very basis of Hinduism. What we call Hinduism has its basis in Vedanta. And so a lot of things that we do, it can be all traced to the teaching of Vedanta. Therefore, understanding Vedanta is understanding Hinduism. And understanding Tattvabodha is understanding Vedanta also. Because Tattvabodha, in essence, in short, teaches us the important principles that are delineated in Vedanta, in Upanishads, in Bhagavad Gita, in Brahma Sutra. Therefore, we have selected this text, Tattvabodha, for this camp, and a thorough understanding of this text will give you a very beautiful understanding of Vedanta and therefore our whole life. We are only interested in ourselves. And we are interested in Vedanta because it deals with ourselves. Understand that the most important person in my life is myself. And there are some other things that are important to me. Those who are near and dear ones and close relatives and many other people also and certain things also are important to me. They are important to me because I am important to myself. In this world, whatever is important to me is important to me because I am important to myself. And so the sage Yajnavalkya teaches his wife Maitreyi. Hey Maitreyi, the husband is dear or important not for the sake of husband, but for the sake of oneself. The wife is important to the husband not for the sake of wife, but for the sake of his own self. And anybody, whether they are my children, whether that is my wealth, whoever they are, all of these are dear to me. They are important to me, not for their sake, but because I am important to myself. So I am the most important one to myself. And all the time I am thinking about myself. And whatever else I think of is all in fact based on my thinking about myself. What do I think of? Only thing that concerns me. Swami, there are anxieties, there are worries, there are problems. All right. All these things concern me because I am concerned about myself. So my concerns ultimately are all based on my concerns about myself. It's understandable. It may look as though each one of us is selfish or self-centered, which is true. And all we can say is that it is not a crime or not a fault of us that we are self-centered. But what is important is that self-centeredness will become meaningful provided we understand what the self is and what self-centeredness means. So, if you understand what self-centeredness means, then being self-centered also will become meaningful. Otherwise, being self-centered on account of a wrong understanding of what the self is or what self-centeredness is becomes a source of all our sorrow. So, on one hand, self-centeredness is the cause of sorrow. On the other hand, if properly understood, self-centeredness would become the solution of all the sorrows. And that is what Tattvabodha, that's what Vedanta teaches us. So Vedanta essentially deals with our own self. Upanishad means self-knowledge. Therefore Vedanta deals with self-knowledge. But Swamiji in the introduction here, he said that Tattvabodha is the knowledge of the truth. And now we are saying that Vedanta deals with knowledge of the self. Because the self is the truth. So what is self? What is myself? Or I happens also to be the truth. And therefore, knowledge of truth coincides with knowledge of I or knowledge of myself. And as it happens, you are not really different from me also, and therefore knowledge of myself also includes the knowledge of you. And even God also is not different from me, and therefore knowledge of myself also includes knowledge of God. Or let us say that in order to truly understand who I am, it is important that I should not only know myself, but should know the world also, and should know God also, and then only my knowledge will be complete. Now what is this Vedanta? You say, Swamiji, Vedanta is a body of knowledge. What does Vedanta teach us? The teaching of Vedanta can be summarized in one simple statement. One simple short statement, and that is Tattvamasi, that thou art. You are that. So Vedanta teaches us, you are that. Tat means that. Tvam means you or thou, and asi means are. Thou art that, or you are that. What is that? That is what it is that you are trying to be, what it is that you want to be. So you are what you want to be. You are what you are seeking to be. But Swamiji, how do you know what I want to be? I want to be a millionaire. How do you know what I want to be? I want to be a millionaire. I want to see my children. I want to see that one of my children becomes a doctor, other one becomes a lawyer. That's what I want to be. I want to be mother of so many children, father of this way. I want to be mother, father. I want to be wealthy. I want to do many things. The Upanishad says, you are what you want to be. How can you say that? I know what my bank account is. I'm not a millionaire or a multimillionaire. How do you say that I am already what I want to be? I'm not yet married, Swami. I want to get married. How do you say that I am already married? You can't say that. How can I say I already am what I want to be? Then Vedanta asks us, okay, you want to be a millionaire or a multimillionaire. Fine. So what? What will happen to you? What will happen to me? That you will know only when you have it. Yes, what will happen to you? Wonderful. I'll just feel happy. Wonderful I'll feel. So I'll feel happy. What when you get married? I'll feel happy. What when you have a child? I'll be happy. And thus, if you ask this question, why do we want various things? The answer will be one simple answer, that I want to be happy. And therefore, what we want to be can be simply understood as we just want to be happy. How happy do we want to be? Swami, I just want to be happy. If I had my way, not even a trace of unhappiness. I would only want happiness in my life and not even a trace of unhappiness in my life. It's also fair. And this is the aspiration or desire of everyone. Every human being, without exception, wants happiness and nobody wants unhappiness. And I want happiness unmixed with unhappiness. At all the times, at all the places, and all the conditions. Unconditional happiness I want. Whether I am at home or I am away, at place of work or in the marketplace, in Gurukulam, outside Gurukulam, with friends, without friends, alone, in company. Wherever I am, I want to be happy. Meaning that I don't want that I should be happy only when I am in company with a certain person, then I am happy, otherwise I am not. I don't like that. That I am happy only when I am at home and not at place of work, I don't like that. That I am happy when I am lying down sleeping or I am taking rest and not when I am working, I don't like that. I want to be happy in all conditions, without exception. So unconditionally happy I want to be, which is fair. This is what everyone wants. That unconditional happiness or unconditional freedom. So this is the only desire that we have. The desire behind all the desires is to be unconditionally happy, unconditionally free. Vedanta says you already are that. You already are that happiness or that freedom is what you already are. This is the teaching. And if the self is truth, that means that the truth of life is happiness. Happiness or freedom is the truth of life, upon which everything is based. But Swami, that's not right. If you say that I am happy, how can you say that? Because I know what I am. You say that I am already happy and free, and I know what I am. I don't feel that way at all. So that's another thing. Vedanta has one perception of ourselves, that we are already happy or free, and we have a perception of ourselves that we are bound or we are unhappy. So thus there are these two contradictory perceptions. The question is, I say that I am unhappy, I say that I am bound, I say that I am limited. Is this truth about myself, or is this merely an opinion about myself? That I am bound or limited, is this the truth about myself? Is it reality about myself, or is it merely a perception or opinion or a conclusion about myself? So, but I feel that I am limited. Just because I feel, it does not mean that it has to be true. But I see it. Just because I see does not mean it has to be true. I see a snake where there is only a rope. Sometimes it happens that where instead of rope, I see a snake because there is not enough light, and therefore there is delusion, delusion in my mind, and therefore I see things different from what they are. It's not unusual. So just because I see a snake does not mean that a snake has to be there. But Swami, I am scared. Why am I scared? Because I see a snake. But that snake is my perception and not a reality. Because what is really there is only rope. And therefore, that fear and everything created in my mind are not because of what is, but because of what I think it is. Because of my perception of that object, because I see it as snake, therefore I am afraid, therefore there is fear, and therefore fear has no basis if I knew what it was, because the perception of rope would not create any reaction, any fear. So similarly, I feel that I am a limited being, I am dependent, I am helpless, I am insignificant, I am small, and therefore I want to become big, I want to become significant. But am I really small? Am I really insignificant? Or this is my perception or conclusion of myself? Vedanta says that there is simply a conclusion about yourself and not a reality about yourself. In fact, Vedanta teaches us that I am limitless, I am ever free. How is it so? We'll see. But all we are saying right now is that there is something called a false perception in our life. Sometimes it's called delusion sometimes, or false perception, misapprehension. And we are born with a false perception of our own self. If, as I said, if it did not matter, if I could be happy in spite of whatever perception I have, it's no problem. But whether I am happy or not is determined by my perception of myself. And again, what I do and don't do is all determined by my perception of myself. All my desires and aspirations and ambitions, all of these are determined by my perception of myself. And we just take for granted the way we perceive is the way we are. But Vedanta does not take it for granted. Let us first settle this issue as to who I am. And then you decide what you want to do. And therefore, Tattvabodha addresses this question what is the nature of self? There is a question asked there, Atma Kaha, what's the nature of self? And the world has an important role to play in my life. Therefore, what's the nature of world? And what's the nature of God? So, Tatwa Bhodha, or the knowledge of the Tattva, knowledge of the truths, gives us the true perception of ourselves and true perception of everything else in our life. Knowing which then, nothing remains to be known, knowing which all our problems are solved. If we truly know ourselves to be what we are, there is no problem in life at all. By problem, there is no occasion for any sorrow, no occasion for grief, no occasion for any frustration, no occasion for anger, no occasion of any conflict, no occasion of any unhappiness at all, if we truly knew ourselves as to what we are. Because if I recognize that I am free, I am limitless, I am boundless. Not only I am boundless or I am limitless, but that nothing can ever impose any limits upon me. Nothing can bind me. Like the space, which is boundless. If the space knows itself as a space, then it is boundless. And then nothing can bring about a boundary. But here is a small little pot. It looks as though the pot brings about a boundary in the space. Thus we have a little space confined to the pot. It is called pot space. So therefore, this poor space within the pot feels that I am pot space. I am confined to the pot. Outside the vast space that is different from me, and I am just confined here. And therefore, that so-called pot space suffers from a sense of confinement. It suffers from the sense of confinement, sense of smallness. And if there is another pot, in the vicinity, like this one here, well, this poor space also within this pot also feels confined, no doubt. However, when this big pot space looks at a small pot space, then what does it feel? I'm something. I'm great. It has pride. It feels great. And this little pot space feels small or inferior. So therefore, this pot space is a superiority complex. It thinks it's superior to another pot space. And this little pot space feels inferior to a bigger pot space. And then, if you yet another pot, there are many here. This one here is a little one. So this middle part space, when it looks at this one, it feels, I'm something. This little smallest part space feels just miserable because I'm small, confined, insignificant. So whether I feel small or big, whether I feel superior or inferior, whether I'm proud or I'm miserable, is determined based on my perception of myself. The point is the space within this pot really confined to this pot? Is it true? If the space feels that it is confined to this pot, is it the true perception or true understanding of itself on the part of the space? Answer is no, that the pot cannot really bind the space, cannot confine the space. It is not that the space is in the pot, it is indeed the pot which is in the space. And therefore, the presence of pot in no way creates a confinement in space. Although when the pot moves, we think that the space moves, but the space does not move, the pot moves in space. And therefore, there is no such entity called a pot space. It is merely a delusion or a false notion on the part of space. So space looks at this pot and thinks that it is confined to that pot. It is not, but just thinks that it is confined to that pot, and thus suffers from a sense of confinement. And that is enough. It is It does not matter what the space is, what matters is what the space takes itself to be. Even though by nature space is boundless. But for whatever reason, this space, I should not say this space because that is this space, but somehow the space thinks that it is confined to the part, and then it suffers from a sense of confinement, even though it is not confined. Thus, for the space to suffer, it is not necessary that it should be confined. All that is necessary that it should feel that it is confined. For me to have fear in my mind, it is not necessary that there must be a real snake there. It must be the feeling. I feel that there is a snake. What is that is rope, but I feel that it is a snake. And it creates in me the reactions as though it was a real snake. And similarly, I feel that I am confined to this body. I am confined to my mind. I am confined to my intellect. I am confined in my knowledge. I am confined in my understanding. I am confined in my capacities. I am confined in my abilities. Therefore, I look upon myself as a limited person, confined in every way. Limited in every way. But that is my feeling or my perception of myself. In fact, the I happens to be boundless and limitless self. Happens to be boundless or limitless consciousness, as we shall see. And only on account of ignorance, I have a false perception that I am confined to this part, such as the body. Just as the space feels that it is confined to this part, so also I feel that I am confined to this personality, made up of this body-mind complex. And therefore, I am suffering from a sense of smallness. And regardless of how big I become, how big this part becomes, suppose it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, how big will it be? Like this big hall it will become, and still it will feel confined only. It may become a huge tank of iron, 100,000 liters of water, and still it will not be free from a sense of confinement, a sense of smallness. It may feel proud when it looks at little ones and then feel some satisfaction for a moment, but again when it looks at the vast space, it again comes back to its small sense of smallness. And therefore, this process of becoming can never make me free from the sense of smallness. I feel small because right now I just have a few $1,000s. I become a millionaire, well, I become bigger than what I am now, but still I feel small, a millionaire small. And a millionaire small. As Swami says, uncomfortably miserable and comfortably miserable. And so, a poor miserable person and a wealthy miserable person. But that I am miserable. And I am miserable because I think that I am small. There is no other reason for me to feel unhappy or miserable other than this perception that I am small or limited. That's all. Whenever I find myself a small or limited being, whenever I find myself dependent or controlled, whenever I find myself not being able to assert myself, I feel that I am confined, controlled, limited, bound. That is when I feel unhappy. Smaller I feel, more unhappy I feel. Less small I feel, less unhappy I feel. Understand that all the time I am unhappy. What we call happiness is nothing but a degree of, is sort of a relief from unhappiness. That's all it is. Because at no time am I free from this thought or the conclusion that I am small. At no time. There are moments when I forget that conclusion I am small, drops off for a moment when I feel very happy. But again something happens, that conclusion comes back and unhappiness again takes hold of me, and therefore basically we are unhappy people. Not because there is a reason to be unhappy, but only because there is this false perception that we have. Vedanta says that you are what you are seeking to be. Understand that you are seeking to be totally free. You are seeking to be happy. Boundless happiness is what you want. And it is quite fair that you want that because that happens to be your nature. Freedom happens to be our nature. Happiness happens to... That is why we love freedom. Why do we love freedom? Why do we love to be happy? That is because freedom is my nature. Happiness is my nature. And therefore there is love. Fire loves to be hot. Fire doesn't like to become cold because it will no more remain fire. And sun loves to be bright because brightness is the nature of sun. And so also I love to be free because freedom is my nature. I love to be happy because happiness is my nature. And therefore all the time I'm struggling to be free, struggling to be happy. But struggling to be free from what? From an imagined bondage. I'm struggling to be free from an imagined binding. I'm struggling to be happy from an imagined sorrow. If sorrow was my nature, then it's okay to feel sorrow, but now it's not. So this is the primary teaching of Vedanta, that Tattvamasi, that thou art. You are what you are seeking to be. You are already free, you are ever free, you are boundless, you are happiness. And that happens to be also the Tattva or the truth. So therefore, Tattvabodha is primarily self-knowledge. So we'll find here in this text a discussion on what is the nature of the self. And also discussion of what's the nature of world, what's the nature of God, what's the relationship among them. And as we said, it's one truth that is the basis of what we call the individual, the world and God. And that truth is called Tattva, and Tattvabodha, knowledge of the truth, which is the basis of the entire existence, is what is taught in Tattvabodha. With that introduction now, let us proceed with the text itself. So open from the fourth page, the text begins, fourth page of your camp booklet. The text begins with invocation, with a prayer or invocation. It is customary in the Vedic tradition to begin all auspicious things with prayer or invocation. Prayer or invocation is seeking the grace of the one to whom I am praying. Usually it is a prayer to Ishvara, to Lord. Sometimes prayer to Guru, the teacher. Because often we do not see any difference between the Lord and the teacher. So this text also begins with an invocation verse, with a prayer verse. Why do we pray? There can be different reasons for prayer. Prayer can be simply an expression of my happiness and joy, and therefore I can pray praising the Lord, extolling the Lord. Our prayer can be because I am seeking some favor. I am seeking the favor of the Lord. I am seeking the grace of the Lord. And here also there is a prayer expressing both the nature of the Lord and the teacher, as well as seeking the grace of the teacher. So we recognize that we need the grace or favorableness of God or favorableness of the Lord. Because it is our experience that for successful completion of any endeavor, our own effort is not enough. It is required. For successful completion of an endeavor, no doubt, a proper effort is required. And that effort must be made for a given length of time, that also is required. So if I want the mango fruits in my garden, I must sow the mango seed, and I must do what is required. What kind of soil that requires, what kind of manure it requires, what kind of watering it requires, I must tend the plant, And thus I must make the appropriate effort. At the same time, I have to wait for a certain number of years before the tree starts giving fruit, because it doesn't happen overnight. Therefore, my effort is required. Effort at the right time also is required, because that sapling must be sown at a given time, before the arrival of monsoon, before the arrival of rain, so that that thing will survive there and then will flourish. So the right time and for the right duration of time, an appropriate effort must be made. This is, of course, a required condition. And we know that in spite of that, we are not always successful, that every plant does not survive there. Everything does not happen the way we want, in spite of our best efforts, because there are many factors which also control the outcome, the factors which are not in our control, the factors sometimes which are not even known. So there are variables in our life, or the factors in our life which are unknown and which are not even under our control, and very often they decide the result, or they have an important contribution to the result. Therefore, it is important that those unknown variables also should be in my favor. So Swamiji, we are now going to have a wedding of our daughter, and we are going to make a nice little pandal. But I pray that it should not rain. So this prayer is required. So we make a lot of preparation, but still we wish that it should not rain, otherwise it will ruin everything. Now we can't control whether it will rain or not. So you can pray to the Lord, "Oh Lord, please do not send forth rain on that day." People do this kind of prayers also. They go to temple and make offerings of 100 coconuts so that it will not rain on a given day. We are all mortals in a way, we are limited, we need help. We don't control everything, we are not all knowledge, we are not all powerful, we can't control everything, and therefore we need help, we need the favorableness of these factors which we don't control, and therefore prayer is a means of seeking the favor or grace of all these factors which we call Lord, because the Lord alone is manifest as the various variables, various laws, and we want those laws to be favorable to us. In Sanskrit, this is called Daivam. Daivam means the grace of God. So prayer is performed for Daivam, seeking the grace of God. And this text also begins with a prayer. It is a prayer to the Lord as well as prayer to the teacher. Because they do not see the difference between the Lord and the teacher. We say that the Lord alone manifests before us in the form of our teacher. And thus, this text begins with a prayer. Another clarification we should make is, this text is said to be composed by Shankaracharya. We mentioned that Adi Shankaracharya composed the bhashyas or commentaries on the three main texts of Vedanta, upon Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutra, and thus, of course, made a tremendous contribution. Without him, of course, the Hinduism would not have been what it is today. Whether it may not have been there at all, altogether it's possible. And Shankaracharya also wrote a number of treatises for beginners, so that they can gain an insight into what the teaching of Vedanta is, and that gives us an entry into the more advanced texts. So this is an introductory text, Tattvabodha, said to be written by Shankaracharya. And so Shankaracharya begins this text with a prayer invocation. Another thing to be noted is that the Upanishads are, the teaching of Vedanta is in the form of a dialogue between the teacher and the student. We find Upanishads, many of them, as dialogue between the teachers and the student. A student approaches the teacher and he asks a relevant question, and then teaching is in answer to the question or questions by the student. We find Bhagavad Gita also as the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. And this text, Tattvabodha, also is composed in the form of a dialogue between the teacher and the student. This is the methodology of teaching, that the student has the freedom to ask questions. If there is confusion, if there is doubt, if things are not clear, the student has all the freedom to ask the questions and seek clarifications from the teacher. In fact, teachers want the students to ask questions. It is said that you should not even impart this teaching unless asked for. And therefore, asking questions, not questioning, but asking questions is a very important aspect of the tradition of teaching of Vedanta. So we'll find that this text Tattvabodha also is in the form of questions and answers. So let us read the first verse, which is the prayer verse, invocation verse. Those of you can read Devanagari, then it's in Sanskrit verse in Devanagari. There is also an English transliteration for those who cannot read the Devanagari script. Then you find that there is a word meaning. Every word is given in Devanagari as well as in English transliteration, and there is translation of that passage of the verse. So I will chant one line of this verse, one quarter. You please repeat after me. Vasudevendra Yogindram Sudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnanapradam Gurum Natva Jnanapradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodho Vidhiyate Tattvabodho Vidhiyate. Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnanapradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodha Abhidhiyate. See the translation, word meaning. Natva, having saluted. Gurum, the teacher. Having saluted the teacher. So, the author here starts writing this book or composing the work after saluting the teacher. I salute my teacher. I salute my teacher as an expression of my sense of gratitude for what I have gained from the teacher. And I further salute the teacher in order to get the grace of the teacher. Who is the teacher? He says, Jnanapradam. Jnanapradam, one who gives knowledge. So, Jnanapradam Gurum Natva, having saluted the teacher who has imparted the knowledge to me. And thus the student feels a highest sense of gratitude for the teacher. Because the teacher is the one, the word Guru itself is explained as the one who dispels the darkness of ignorance. The letter Gu stands for darkness, the letter Ru stands for that which dispels the darkness. In fact, on the previous page, see the third page, right across that, you see a verse there which says, Gukaras Tvandhakaro vai, Rukaras Tvannivartakaha, Andhakara Nirodhitvat, Guru Ityabhidhiyate. The syllable Gu stands for darkness of ignorance, and Ru represents the remover. A Guru is so called because he removes the darkness of ignorance. That is how one way of explaining the word Guru. Guru means teacher who dispels the darkness of ignorance. And therefore, anybody who removes ignorance of a particular topic or a subject can be called Guru. But in this case, Guru is the one who removes the darkness of ignorance pertaining to my own self. I am born with ignorance, and not only ignorance, but then with false perception of myself and that is the cause of my suffering. And therefore, by removing ignorance and illumining the lamp of knowledge in my heart, the teacher removes all the false perceptions, all the notions, all the wrong conclusions, all the complexes I am entertaining about myself, and thus removes all the sorrow from my heart and brings to manifestation the wholeness or the fullness of freedom which is my nature. It is only on account of Guru, only on account of teacher that I am what I am. This is how every student feels, and therefore there is always a sense of gratitude and a tremendous reverence for the teacher. And therefore, first saluting the teacher. The composition of this work starts having saluted the teacher. So remember the teacher in your heart. And as we said, teacher is a role model. Teacher is in fact nothing but manifestation of Lord, and therefore remembering teacher also becomes a remembrance of Ishvara, the Lord. What's the name of the teacher? Vasudevendra Yogindram, the next verse. The one who is none other than Vasudevendra, who is Yogindra, the king of all the yogis. Vasudevendra. So, most of us are familiar with the name Vasudeva. Some of you may or may not be, but most of us are familiar with the name Vasudeva. That's the name of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna was called Vasudeva because he was the son of Vasudeva. The name of Lord Krishna's father was Vasudeva. Being his son, Lord Krishna was called Vasudeva. But then Lord did not gain name Vasudeva only after he was born of Vasudeva. That name was always there. Vasudeva itself means something. Vasu means one who dwells, and Deva is one. Deva means the self-effulgent Lord. So self-effulgent Lord who dwells in all the beings, who is self of all the beings, is called Vasudeva. Or the Lord in whom the entire creation dwells also is called Vasudeva. So one who dwells as a self in the hearts of all, one in whom this universe also dwells, who is the self of the whole universe, who is the support of the entire universe, and who shines as the self of all the beings, that Vasudeva, the Lord, who is also Yogindra, the most exalted yogi. Yogi is the one who has the capability, is called yogi, and here Lord is called Yogindra, the most exalted yogi, because he has the capability of creating, sustaining, dissolving the whole universe. That is called Yogindra. Vasudevendra Yogindra. So, my teacher, whose name is Vasudevendra, so the name Vasudeva can be simply a name, or it also means, as we said, the Lord, who is the indweller of the hearts of all the beings, who is the support of the entire universe, and who is Yogindra, the most exalted yogi, because he is the creator, the sustainer and dissolver of the creation. To that Lord or to that teacher. Because this Vasudeva, as we said, is the name of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna has many names. One of the names of Lord Krishna is Govinda. And Govinda happens to be the name of Shankaracharya's teacher also. So, in the pretext of remembering the Lord, Shankaracharya also remembers his teacher. Because Vasudevendra, Yogindra is the teacher. The Lord is the teacher. But Lord, in the form of my Guru, is the teacher. And so to whom, having saluted, Mumukshunam hitarthaya Tattvabodha, this text called Tattvabodha, Mumukshunam hitarthaya, for benefit of those desirous of liberation, Abhidhyate is presented. So here is presented a text called Tattvabodha for the benefit of mumukshus, those who are desirous of liberation. So this is the verse, invocation verse. So from now on, we will begin, after chanting the prayer verses, we will also recite this verse and then begin our classes. We will continue the discussion of this verse also in the next class. Om Purnamadav पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः